The transmission came at 0300 hours, Fleet Standard Time. Admiral Darian Voss was already awake when the holographic display erupted across the command bridge of the UNHS Resolute, bathing everything in a cold blue glow. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, gray eyes unmoved, watching the alien face materialize before him, reptilian, crowned in obsidian and gold, scales the color of dried blood. King Zalor of the Vreth Dominion. Admiral. The translator rendered Zalor's guttural clicks into crisp English, though the contempt needed no translation. You have 48 of your primitive hours to surrender the Kepler corridor. Failure to comply will be met with the full force of the Dominion's eternal fleet. The massive alien leaned forward, his vertical pupils narrowing. We have destroyed civilizations older than your species' first fire. Do not make the mistake of believing yourselves exceptional. The bridge crew stood in tense silence. 23 officers, all watching Darian Voss. Voss let the silence breathe for a long moment. Then he picked up his coffee mug, took a slow sip, and set it down. Tell His Majesty, Voss said to the calm officer without looking away from Zalor's image, that we'll need the full 48 hours. We have a lot of preparation to do. He cut the feed. Lieutenant Commander Yara Chin appeared at his shoulder. Sir. The Eternal Fleet is 600 warships. We have 41. 43, Voss corrected. The Meridian and Bastille finished resupply an hour ago. Sir, with respect, 43. Voss turned to face her fully. Yara Chin had graduated top of her class at the Jakarta Naval Academy. She had survived the siege of Proxima Station. She was not, Darian Voss knew, a woman prone to fear. The fact that her hands were slightly tied at her sides told him everything about the stakes. Yara, he said quietly. What do we know about the Vreth Eternal Fleet? Heavy capital ships. Long-range plasma cannons. Exceptional armor. Their tactical doctrine relies on overwhelming force, mass formation attacks designed to shatter enemy morale before the first volley is even fired. She paused. It works. Against everyone they've ever fought. And what do we know about us? A small silence. We don't break, she said. No, Voss agreed. We don't. The Vreth Eternal Fleet arrived in the Kepler corridor exactly 47 hours and 58 minutes later, emerging from folded space in a wall of iron and fire that blotted out the stars behind it. 600 warships in tight formation, a demonstration of power so absolute that lesser civilizations had reportedly begun surrender negotiations at the mere sight of it. The 43 human ships were waiting for them. Arranged not in defensive formation, but in an aggressive forward wedge. King Zalor watched from the bridge of his flagship, the Dominion's Will, as the human formation held. His admiral, Essi Kavareth, clicked quietly at his side. Curious. They advanced to meet us. Ritual suicide, Zalor said dismissively. Some species choose defiance over survival. It is aesthetically interesting, if strategically pointless. He waved one clawed hand. Open fire. Let's be done with. My king. Essi Kavareth's voice had changed. Gone strange. The human ships. They have separated. Zalor looked again at the display. Where there had been 43 human vessels in clean formation, there were now thousands of contacts. His threat board erupted in screaming alerts. Drone fighters, launched from every human ship simultaneously, dispersed across a combat grid so wide it overwhelmed the Vreth targeting systems in the opening seconds. Behind the drones came the human ships themselves, no longer in neat formation but splitting, scattering, threading into the gaps between Vreth capital ships with a recklessness that looked suicidal until Zalor realized it wasn't. They're inside our formation, Essi Kavareth said. They're inside. The first human torpedoes hit the Dominion's Will from 4 directions at once, targeting the exact junction points where the armor plating was thinnest. Not because the humans had stolen Vreth schematics. Because they had spent 2 centuries studying every wreck, every fragment, every scrap of Vreth technology they could salvage from prior conflicts, not their own conflicts. Other species defeats. Because humans, Zalor was now learning, were obsessive archivists of violence. They had studied the Vreth Dominion's war record the way a biologist studied a predator's anatomy. Every weakness. Catalogued. Memorized. Drilled. Within the first 11 minutes, the Vreth lost 40 ships. Within the first hour, they lost 212. The remainder of the Eternal Fleet, the force that had never broken, never retreated, never suffered anything but absolute victory in 300 years of interstellar conquest, ran. The Dominions did not make it to Fold Space. Darien Voss boarded the crippled flagship personally, leading a company of UNMC Marines through corridors still sparking with emergency lights. They found King Zalor in the royal chamber, surrounded by the 12 members of his royal guard, each of whom was approximately twice the mass of a human soldier and armed with weapons that had ended civilizations. The Marines didn't hesitate. The fight lasted 4 minutes. Voss stepped over the last fallen guard and stood before King Zalor of the Vreth Dominion, who was pressed against the far wall, a plasma burn across his chest, his obsidian crown slightly crooked. The alien king was enormous. He loomed over Voss by 2 full meters. Zalor stared down at the human admiral with something he had not experienced in 3 centuries. Genuine uncertainty. "You cannot do this," Zalor said. "I am a sovereign monarch. I am Vreth. There are conventions, there are ancient laws of war." "You declared war on humanity," Voss said simply. "We won." He looked at one of his sergeants. "Get him on his feet." They walked King Zalor of the Vreth Dominion through the main promenade of Kepler Station in magnetic restraints. News traveled faster than light these days. By the time the procession moved down the central boulevard, every screen on every station in the corridor was broadcasting. Not just human screens, feeds were being picked up by Vreth communication relays still intact in nearby systems, by neutral traders, by the 12 other spacefaring civilizations who had watched the Vreth Eternal Fleet annihilate opposition for 300 years and quietly decided that resistance was pointless. They were watching now. They watched a human, one ordinary human in a service uniform, gray at the temples, coffee mug reportedly still somewhere on his ship, walk the Vreth King through a corridor of silent, watching people. Not a mob. Not screaming or throwing things. Just watching, arms crossed, faces set with the particular expression humans wore when they had endured something long enough. Zalor had expected humiliation. Public execution, perhaps. He had expected to be made an example in fire and blood. He had not expected the silence. It was somehow worse. These creatures had just destroyed the Eternal Fleet, the most feared military force in 5 sectors, and they were standing here quietly, watching him walk by in chains, as if this was simply the next task on a list they had been working through methodically. As if beating him had not been remarkable. As if it was simply what humans did to things that threatened them. It was then, walking through that silence, that King Zalor of the Vreth Dominion understood something that 3 centuries of conquest had not taught him. He had not been defeated by luck. He had not been defeated by numbers or surprise. He had been defeated by patience. By a species that kept records of every war ever fought, that studied defeat the way others studied victory, that had lost and lost and lost throughout their history and kept getting back up and taking notes. A species for whom pain was not a deterrent. A species that had been knocked into extinction-level events twice in their own prehistory and had responded by building cities, then ships, then weapons, and then, quietly, methodically, reaching for the stars. Dangerous. The Vreth had called humans dangerous. They had said it the way one says a minor inconvenience is dangerous. They had been wrong about the scale. Admiral Darien Voss stood at the comms terminal as the Vreth peace delegation connected, 3 days later. The remaining Dominion admirals on screen looked old suddenly. Diminished. "We wish to discuss terms," the senior admiral said. Voss pulled up the chair. Took out a notepad, an actual physical notepad, which he knew unnerved alien species. They could never quite understand why humans kept paper. He clicked his pen. Good, Voss said. Let's start at the beginning. Outside the viewport, the stars were quiet. They would stay that way for a long time.